The year was 1979, and a heavy, almost mournful silence had settled over the cedar-paneled study of the Newport Beach estate. Outside, the world was moving at a frantic, uncertain pace, but inside these walls, time seemed to have slowed to a crawl. June had brought a thick, golden heat to the California coastline, the kind of atmosphere that usually signaled the beginning of a long, sun-drenched filming season in the high deserts of Arizona or the rugged, wind-swept canyons of Utah. But for the man the world knew simply and reverently as the Duke, the long seasons of grease paint, the thunderous action, cues, and the heroic silver screen charges were drawing to an inevitable, quiet close. John Wayne sat in his favorite, well-worn leather recliner, his steel blue eyes fixed on the Pacific horizon where the sun was beginning its slow, majestic descent into the deep blue. The rhythmic, relentless crash of the waves against the shore served as the only soundtrack to his deepest, most private thoughts. He was a titan carved from the very rock and dust of the American West, a man who had survived 1,000 cinematic duels and stared down real-life KGB assassins in the long, terrifying shadows of the Cold War. But now, he was facing an enemy that didn't hide in the sagebrush or wait at the end of a dusty street for a showdown. He was facing the silent, unstoppable, and uncompromising march of time. Inside that study, which smelled deeply of salt air, old hand-tooled leather, and the faint, lingering ghost of expensive, aged bourbon, the reality was a stark and moving contrast to the invincible legend the world adored. To the millions of fans who had cheered for him in darkened theaters from the busy streets of New York to the quiet villages of Japan, he was an unbreakable symbol of raw American strength. But in the dim, amber light of that June evening, John Wayne was a man of flesh and bone, feeling the crushing weight of every single year he had dedicated to the silver screen and the grueling, often lonely demands of his own myth. Yet, even as his physical strength began to waver under the strain of illness, his spirit remained as restless, untamed, and defiant as a wild stallion on the open Nevada plains. He wasn't looking for the hollow comfort of a quiet retirement. He was looking for a way to ensure that the America he loved, the one he had personified for over half a century, would survive the coming storms without his presence. He reached for a silver-tipped pen on his desk. His hands, which had once spun a Winchester with the effortless, lightning grace of a master, were heavy and trembling with the fatigue of a life lived at full gallop. But the fire in those eyes hadn't dimmed by a single degree. He had one final, urgent mission, a secret will, and there was only one man in all of America he trusted enough to receive the torch he was about to pass, his old friend, Ronnie. To truly grasp the profound weight of why this letter exists, we must travel back through the thick, swirling fog of Hollywood history, to a time when Ronald Reagan and John Wayne were just two hungry, ambitious young actors chasing their destinies under the unforgiving California sun. They weren't just colleagues in a competitive and often cutthroat industry. They were brothers in arms, forged in the brutal and demanding fires of the old studio system. They had shared countless late-night meals in smoky diners, debating the uncertain future of the nation on the backlots of Warner Brothers, Republic, and Paramount Pictures. They had witnessed together the seismic transition from the silent era to the golden age of talkies, but more importantly, they saw the very soul of America changing before their eyes during the Great Depression and the Second World War. While Wayne became the physical, rugged face of the frontier and the individualist hero, Reagan was becoming the articulate, principled voice of the nation's conscience. They were two halves of the same American heart, and as the decades rolled by, their bond only grew stronger, cemented by a shared and unshakable belief in honor, personal duty, and the rugged, independent spirit that had built the West from nothing but red dust and impossible dreams. In the 1940s and 50s, while Duke was leading cavalry charges on screen, Reagan was leading the Screen Actors Guild through the minefields of political infiltration. They stood shoulder to shoulder during the darkest days of the Red Scare, protecting the industry they loved from those who sought to use it as a weapon of propaganda. They spent long weekends at Wayne's ranch or on his boat, the Wild Goose, discussing not just scripts or box office numbers, but the fundamental nature of freedom. They saw themselves as guardians of a specific American ideal, the idea that a man's character was his destiny and that liberty was something that had to be earned and defended by every generation. This wasn't a friendship of convenience. It was a covenant of shared values. By the late 1970s, as Reagan began his serious climb toward the highest office in the land, Wayne was his most vocal, yet most private, advisor. He knew the man behind the politician, and he knew that Ronnie was the only one who could translate the cowboy code into a national policy of strength and hope. By the late 1970s, the world they had helped build felt like it was slipping away through their fingers like dry sand. The nation was reeling from the deep, agonizing wounds of the Vietnam War and the bitter, divisive scars of political scandals that had shaken the very foundations of public trust. Faith in the American dream was at an all-time low, replaced by a cynical, weary malaise. As Duke sat in his study, watching the nightly news on a flickering television set that projected images of gas lines, inflation, and international humiliation, he felt a deep, gnawing anxiety that no medicine could touch. He didn't fear death for himself. He had looked it in the face on the radioactive sands of Utah and the surgical tables of Los Angeles too many times to be afraid now. What he feared was the death of the ideals he had spent 50 years projecting onto the screens of the world. He saw a country he believed was becoming soft, losing its essential grit, and forgetting the hard-won, bloody lessons of the pioneers, the settlers, and the veterans. He knew with a chilling certainty that he wouldn't be there to fight the ideological battles of the 1980s. He knew his time on the trail was finally ending. The campfire was burning low. With a sharp, focused intent that pushed aside his immense physical pain, he pressed the pen to the yellowed paper. "Dear Ronnie," he began. It wasn't just a letter from one old friend to another. It was a formal, sacred passing of the mantle from the king of Hollywood to the man who would soon become the leader of the free world. Wayne's concern wasn't just about politics. It was about the culture. He saw the rise of anti-heroes and the glorification of the gray areas where right and wrong were blurred. In his letter, he reflected on the characters he played, the Ethan Edwardses and the Rooster Cogburns. He told Reagan that the people didn't crave complexity as much as they craved clarity. They wanted to know that someone was in charge who knew the difference between a friend and a foe, and who wasn't afraid to draw a line in the sand. He wrote about the exhaustion he felt, not just from the cancer, but from the cultural shift that seemed to apologize for American greatness. He told Ronnie that this silent majority wasn't just a political term. It was a living, breathing group of people who felt abandoned by their leaders and were looking for a tall man to stand up for them once again. He was writing a script for a new American era, one where the hero didn't ride off into the sunset, but stood his ground and rebuilt the town. The contents of this letter, much of which remained whispered about in the inner circles of the White House and the Reagan Ranch for years to come, revealed a side of John Wayne that the general public rarely had the chance to see. A philosopher of the American frontier. He didn't write about his legendary movies, his Golden Globes, or the worldwide fame that had followed him like a shadow for decades. He wrote about what he called the spirit of the tall man. He reminded Reagan that the American people didn't just want a politician with polished, focus group speeches. They wanted a hero they could believe in when the lights went out and the cold wind began to blow. They wanted someone who embodied the same unwavering, rock-solid strength that Wayne had projected on the screen. A man who said exactly what he meant and meant exactly what he said, regardless of the consequences or the critics. He warned Reagan about the shadow men, the bureaucrats, the cynics, and the defeatists who sought to dismantle the American spirit from within, piece by piece, through the slow poison of doubt and compromise. Wayne's words were raw, unfiltered, and deeply, painfully personal. He spoke of the cowboy's code not as a trope for a movie, but as a practical and necessary blueprint for national survival. He told Reagan that the world was looking for a beacon of clarity in a sea of gray, and that this shining city on a hill, a phrase they both loved, was not just a poetic metaphor, but a heavy, daily responsibility that required an iron will to maintain. He expressed his haunting fear that the next generation would forget the smell of the earth, the value of a hard day's work, and the blood price of freedom. He pleaded with Reagan to protect the little man, the farmer in the Midwest, the rancher in Texas, the young veteran in the small town. The people who formed the true, unbreakable backbone of the country, but were so often forgotten in the marble, echo-filled halls of Washington, D.C. This was Wayne's final and most important performance, played out not for an audience of millions, but for an audience of one. It was a masterclass in patriotism, written by a man who was already standing halfway into the great, eternal unknown, his spurs already touching the edges of history. As the night deepened and the cold stars began to poke through the thick coastal fog of Newport Beach, Wayne continued to write, pouring every ounce of his remaining, flickering life force into the page. He reflected on their shared memories, the long, freezing nights on movie sets in the Sierras, the political battles they had fought together against the creeping influence of ideologies that sought to undermine the concept of individual liberty. He reminded Reagan that the Duke persona was a gift and a trust given to him by the people, and that Reagan now held a similar, even more sacred gift. He told him that leadership was a lonely, dangerous trail, filled with dry water holes, treacherous mountain passes, and hidden predators, but that the view from the summit was worth every single struggle and every drop of sweat. He was giving Reagan more than just elder statesman advice. He was giving him the moral authority to lead a revolution of the spirit. He was telling him that the American legend was not a dusty thing of the past to be kept in a museum, but a living, breathing promise for the future that had to be defended every single day. The letter also touched on the idea of peace through strength, a concept that would later define the Reagan presidency. Wayne told Ronnie that in the movies, the bully only backs down when he sees a bigger gun or a braver man. He urged Reagan never to let America's guard down, reminding him that the bad guys don't play by the rules, and they don't respect a man who won't fight. He spoke of his own regrets, perhaps wishing he had done more, but he saw in Reagan the fulfillment of his own unfinished business. When Ronald Reagan finally received and read this letter, those close to him said he was moved to a profound, contemplative silence that lasted for hours. He kept that letter close, often tucked into his private desk or his suit pocket during key moments of his campaign, a physical, tangible reminder of the man who had been the nation's moral anchor for so long. Historians and political analysts now point to this very correspondence as the moment Reagan's resolve became truly unbreakable. When he stood on that cold inauguration stage in January 1981, he wasn't just standing there as a newly elected president. He was standing there as the solemn executor of Wayne's final will and testament. John Wayne passed away on June 11, 1979, just a few short days after he finished his final correspondence with Ronnie. The world mourned the loss of a movie star, a giant of the screen whose name was synonymous with the West itself. But those who knew about the secret letter knew that a prophet of the American spirit had departed the trail. Reagan would often speak of the Duke with a quiet, deep reverence that went far beyond mere Hollywood friendship. He saw Wayne as the ultimate American, a man who didn't just play a part for the cameras, but lived a code of honor every second of his life. Even as Reagan faced his own monumental challenges in the White House, from the Cold War tensions to economic crises, the echoes of that final letter remained his guiding star. It was a testament to the enduring power of a single, honest voice, a reminder that the truth doesn't need a megaphone or a marketing campaign to be heard. It only needs a heart brave and pure enough to carry it forward. Reagan once said in a private moment that whenever he had to make a tough decision, he would sometimes ask himself, what would Duke do? This wasn't because he was looking for a movie script answer, but because he was looking for that bedrock of common sense and courage that Wayne represented. The secret letter was the foundation of that dialogue. Today, as we look back through the thick grain, the flickering light, and the swirling dust of the historical archives, we realize that the legend of John Wayne didn't end with a funeral or a headstone in a quiet cemetery. It continued in every speech Reagan gave to the world about the evil empire, in every stand the country took for the cause of freedom, and in every individual heart that still beats with the steady, unyielding rhythm of the frontier. The secret letter to Reagan is the missing, vital piece of the puzzle, the beyond the legend moment that truly explains why Wayne's shadow still looms so large and so protective over the American landscape today. He taught us that patriotism is not a catchy slogan or a costume for a parade, but a lifelong sacrifice and a sacred duty. He showed us that even when the physical body fails and the breath grows short, the spirit can still command the room and change the course of history. He reminded us that a man's true legacy is not measured by the wealth he leaves in a bank, but by the fire he leaves burning in the souls of those who come after him. As the cold Pacific wind continues to howl through the canyons of time, you can still hear that voice, that steady, unmistakable, gravelly rumble that defined an entire century and shaped the dreams of a nation. It tells us to tighten the cinch, to look the distant horizon dead in the eye without blinking, and to never, ever give up the high ground to the shadows. Stay gold, stay restless. I am Andrew, and this was the final, secret covenant of John Wayne and the man who would be president. As the dust settles on this long chapter, always remember, the trail never truly ends for those who know how to ride with honor. Until we meet again in the deep archives of history, keep your eyes on the stars and your feet firmly in the stirrups. Good night, and may the legend live on in all of us.